We've decided it's time for a change in leadership, said Alan, head of the board. The same guy I'd once covered payroll for out of my own pocket. Sales are down, and the market's evolving. He said it like I wasn't the one who'd built the market in the first place. My name is Michael Grant. I'm 51. And until that Thursday morning, I was the CEO and co-founder of Viren Labs, the very company that now labeled me as non-essential. No, I wasn't perfect. Yeah, sales had dipped. And yes, that's on me. But what the board refused to admit, what they didn't want to admit, is that the dip wasn't about leadership. It was about timing, about market shifts, about a product delay caused by a supply chain disaster in Taiwan. But nuance doesn't matter when your name's the one above the door. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I simply looked around that sterile boardroom, the same one I'd personally helped design when we moved into our third headquarters, and I realized they weren't asking me to leave. They had already decided I didn't belong anymore. Alan Meyer, the board chairman, couldn't even look me in the eye when he said it. He quoted numbers, trends, restructuring for growth, and other buzzwords that usually mean, we want a scapegoat and you're convenient. I founded Virion with 2 laptops and a broken printer. We started in a garage. Yeah, that kind of garage. My wife Anna and I used to run customer support from our kitchen table, while our daughter colored sales charts with crayons. I pitched our platform in cafes, trade shows, and parking lots. I skipped birthdays. I answered calls at 3 a.m. I mortgaged our house to make payroll. I still remember coding through the night while feeding my daughter with one hand and debugging with the other. Now I was being fired. Politely, professionally, but fired. They brought in an interim CEO from some VC-backed firm in Boston. Never met the team, never touched the product, but he had experience with pivots and reputation for aggressive monetization. In other words, he knew how to cut things that mattered and make spreadsheets smile. It reminded me of Steve Jobs, how Apple kicked him out of the very temple he built. But people forget, they lost their soul when he left. Only when everything crumbled did they realize he wasn't the problem. He was the product. Same thing happened to Howard Schultz before he returned to Starbucks. They turned coffee into process. He brought back purpose. And that's where I was. No job, no office. Just a silent phone and a burning clarity. They thought they'd erased me, but they didn't know I'd been quietly preparing for this moment for months. I didn't plan revenge. I planned continuity. Because while they focused on quarterly projections, I focused on people. And people don't forget who fought for them when no one else did. I still remember our first Office A converted storage unit on 6th and Briar. No heating, spotty Wi-Fi, and a leaky ceiling that destroyed our first prototype. But it was ours. Back then, it was just me, Daniel, and Rachel, the original 3. I wrote code. Daniel did the finance. Rachel handled client demos while bouncing her baby in a car seat next to her desk. We weren't chasing headlines. We were solving real problems. Data processing for small clinics, custom tools for local logistics firms. Quiet work, useful work. The kind of work no one sees until it's gone. Our breakthrough came in year 3, a contract with a national healthcare network. I still remember sprinting into the kitchen screaming, "We got it!" while my wife dropped a pan out of shock. From there, things snowballed. Seed round, Series A, 2 office moves, 60 hires in 2 years. By year 5, we were featured in Wired. By year 6, Forbes called us the silent disruptors. By year 7, the suits started showing up. You know the type. Slides before substance, projections before people. I let them in. I didn't stop the wave. Maybe that was my mistake. But back then, I believed in growth the way a parent believes in their child. We built a culture where interns could pitch product ideas and engineers stayed late because they wanted to. It wasn't about free snacks. It was about shared purpose. That's what we had. It's funny. You build something from nothing. You feed it, nurture it, sacrifice for it, and one day people who weren't there for the rainstorms decide they know how to run the garden. They looked at numbers. I looked at people. They saw margins. I saw momentum. They thought I was in the way. But the truth is, I was the reason it worked. The shift didn't happen overnight. It never does. First came the optimization meetings, then the consultants. Young faces in expensive clothes asking questions like, why do we have so many customer support reps? Because humans still call, I wanted to say. But I didn't. Then came the reports. Revenue graphs with no mention of long-term contracts or pending negotiations. Just red arrows. Alan stopped copying me on investor updates. Meetings I used to lead were suddenly rescheduled, always without a new date. My office, once a central hub, became quiet. Emails slowed. Slack messages dropped to a trickle. I remember one moment like it was yesterday. A junior executive, probably 26, maybe 27, asked me to sit in on a product meeting for feedback, the same meeting I had created 5 years earlier. That's when I knew. They weren't asking for my input. They were checking a box. But I wasn't bitter. Not then. I still believed they'd remember who had built the architecture they now dismissed as legacy, that they'd realize not all experience was overhead. I was wrong. Next came the title change. From Chief Executive Officer to Founder and Advisor. Subtle, elegant, surgical. And the board applauded it, said it freed me up to focus on vision. Translation? Step aside while we fix what's working. They brought in Marcus West from Boston, Harvard MBA consultant pedigree, a resume full of transitions, no roots. He walked in with confidence, in zero understanding of our customers, our team, or our culture. But he had a roadmap, a 90-day acceleration plan. Within a month, Rachel was gone. Daniel resigned quietly. 3 senior engineers followed. I should have pushed back harder. I should have burned the room down. But I didn't, because a part of me still hoped they'd come to their senses. Instead, I got a calendar invite titled Executive Realignment Closed Session. And when I clicked into that call and saw their faces, all 8 of them, I already knew what was coming. They didn't blame me. They blamed the market, the shift in user behavior, the global slowdown, all valid, but none of them had even been around during the first 5 years when everything was a slowdown. Still, I didn't argue, because when a house starts to rot from within, it's not the termites you fight, it's the blueprint you rebuild. So I nodded, I smiled, I let them feel in control. And as I walked out of that office, stripped of title, team, and purpose, I held one thought. You think this story's over? The first week after being pushed out, I didn't answer my phone. Not for Alan, not for Marcus, not even when the head of product sent a quick favor request about the legacy integration I had built by hand. I wasn't being petty. I was being deliberate. See, they assumed I'd left empty-handed. What they didn't know is that I am the architecture, the DNA, every system, every key contact, every custom protocol. My fingerprints were everywhere. I didn't slam doors, I didn't post on LinkedIn, I just disappeared, which was far more terrifying. Meanwhile, cracks began to show. The first bug hit the client dashboard within 10 days, a time zone sync issue that nobody on the new team understood. The CTO called me twice, then texted. I left it on red. I watched from a distance as a platform I had built to breathe began to suffocate. A few former engineers reached out quietly. Whispers. Hey, Mike, you seeing what's going on over there? Since you left, man, it's chaos. I'd expected it, because while they were busy restructuring for optics, they had completely overlooked the reality of what I'd built. A living, breathing infrastructure that couldn't just be handed off like a PowerPoint. They thought they'd replaced a man with a strategy. But I was never just a man, I was momentum. I wasn't rushing to take them down. That's not how you do it. This wasn't revenge. This was patience, controlled silence, calculated distance. I started spending time in my garage again, same place where Virion was born. This time, no pressure, no deadlines, just a whiteboard, an idea, and the names of 5 engineers who told me they'd follow me anywhere. And I believed them. So I waited. I listened. I watched the emails come in, the panicked DMS, the declining uptime stats that started leaking on Twitter, and then one message stood out. Subject line, we made a mistake. I didn't open it. Not yet. Because this wasn't about going back. This was about what's next. 3 weeks after I was pushed out of my own company, I got a call from Lauren. Chief Technology Officer at Core Axis Ventures. She wasn't calling to offer condolences. She was calling with intention. "I've seen what you built," she said. "I've seen how fast it fell apart without you. We don't want the broken version. We want you." At first, I hesitated. I wasn't ready to jump into someone else's system again. But Lauren wasn't like the others. She didn't come with a deck or a script. She came with a notebook and handwritten notes. She had mapped my old platform, and she understood the gaps, the elegant chaos that only the original architect could untangle. More than that, she valued it. "We don't need a hired gun," she said. "We need a builder." That's when it clicked. This wasn't a rebound. This was reconstruction. I called Daniel and Rachel first. No pitch, just a question. "You ready to do it again?" They didn't even ask what the name was. They just said yes. Within a month, we had a space. Not fancy, just quiet, like before. We called it Northgate Systems, and unlike Virion, this one would never have a board with more suits than builders. We brought in 5 engineers, all former Virion devs who had either been fired, pushed out, or had simply left when the soul drained from the place. People who knew how to create, not just maintain. This time I wasn't writing code to survive. I was writing to prove. We didn't even announce the company for 6 months. We just worked, built, iterated. While Virion tried to pivot publicly, we were quietly capturing their most frustrated clients. Not because we hunted them, but because they came to us. I'd get emails with subject lines like, "Remember us? Is it true you're building again?" One client wrote, "I miss when your systems worked. Call me." Meanwhile, Virion was bleeding talent. Alan stepped down as board chair. Marcus stopped posting leadership lessons on LinkedIn, and 2 major contracts were lost to what the industry started calling the Northgate effect. Then came the real moment, a message from a private equity partner who had once voted for my removal. "I'd like to meet, strictly confidential." Over drinks, he admitted what I already knew. Virion was in trouble. The core platform was unstable. Revenue flatlined, and the new leadership couldn't fix what they didn't understand. "They need someone who knows how the engine runs," he said. I sipped my drink. Let him sit in the silence. "We're prepared to make you an offer to consult." I interrupted him. "You think I want to come back and fix it for you?" He blinked, didn't know how to respond. I leaned in. "I don't fix broken copies of my own blueprints. I build new ones." But I wasn't done. 2 weeks later, we made them an offer. That's right. Northgate offered to acquire Virion's failing infrastructure division. Not because we needed it, but because we wanted to show them how it's done. The irony? They accepted, desperate, cornered. And in the final board meeting, guess who signed the transition papers? Alan, with trembling hands. I walked into that old office again, not as a returning founder, but as a buyer. And when Marcus tried to shake my hand, I looked him in the eye and said, "You were always good at PowerPoints, but this is how you present results." He didn't smile. The team clapped. Not for revenge, not for me, but because they remembered. The first major client loss wasn't reported publicly, but I heard about it within the hour. One of our former partners, a logistics giant based in Denver, canceled their renewal with Virion after a system outage delayed $2.3 million in shipments. The reason? Inconsistent support and lack of senior technical understanding. Translation: they fired the guy who built the engine and hired people who'd only read the manual. After that, the dominoes fell fast. A former colleague forwarded me an internal Slack message from their operations channel. Marcus had posted, "Let's not panic. We are streamlining." It had 4 emoji reactions. One of them was a vomiting face. Their reputation started slipping. Industry blogs whispered about instability. A leaked email showed they were considering offshoring the core development team, the same one I had personally handpicked for reliability and discretion. And still, they refused to admit the truth. They blamed the market, the economy, AI, everything except the one decision that broke the foundation: removing the builder and expecting the blueprint to build itself. Then came the lawsuits. 2 enterprise clients sued over breach of service level agreements. Another filed for damages after sensitive data was lost due to a failed server migration. The CFO resigned 2 weeks after that. Investors started pulling out, slowly at first, then all at once. One of them, a man named Brent, who once told me my emotional leadership style wasn't scalable, publicly admitted during a webcast, "We may have underestimated the founder's role in early-stage continuity." You think? Meanwhile, Northgate was doubling its onboarding rate month over month. We didn't celebrate. We didn't post about it. We just kept working. But inside Virion, panic set in. People started jumping ship. Recruiters told me ex-employees were flooding LinkedIn, desperate for roles in companies with actual leadership. Then I got the cease and desist letter. Apparently, they thought I had stolen proprietary knowledge. Cute. The documents were filled with vague language and hollow threats. Our legal team laughed. We sent them a one-line response. "Please specify the IP in question so we can remind you who authored it." We never heard back. The final blow came 3 months later. A VC round fell through, creditors began circling, and in a quiet statement posted at 4:57 p.m. on a Friday, Virion announced the strategic suspension of core operations. No apology, no acknowledgement, just silence. But silence can be very loud when you were once the one making all the noise. I always wondered why the decision had felt so rehearsed, not just rushed, scripted. Now I knew why. It started with an email. Rachel forwarded it to me late one night. Subject: FW:"Internal:"Transition Plan Timeline Period. It was dated 2 months before the board meeting where I was reassigned, before the sales dip, before the first investor even mentioned performance concerns. In the attachment, Alan had outlined a complete transition strategy, not just for leadership, but for ownership. There were clauses, drafts, and a tidy little summary. If Michael resists, soften with equity repurchase at fixed valuation. They were planning my exit while I was still pitching Series D. While I was in front of cameras on panels defending the vision, they were behind closed doors, removing my name from the future. And it wasn't just Alan. Marcus had been part of it too. So had the new investors. Their goal wasn't to fix the company, it was to cash out, quickly, quietly, with no founder drama. The dip in sales, manufactured. They had cut 2 marketing pipelines in Q2 under the guise of budget realignment, then used the lower conversion rate as a performance flag. It was brilliant, evil but brilliant. They knew I wouldn't fight dirty. They knew I wouldn't sue, too proud, too focused on people. They used that against me. But here's the thing, I knew something didn't feel right back then. I didn't have proof, just instinct. So I'd quietly made copies of meeting transcripts, saved voice memos from investor calls, backed up Slack channels. Not because I planned to use them, but because something inside me, maybe call it intuition, maybe survival, said document everything. And when Rachel sent that email, everything clicked. They hadn't failed me. They had targeted me. To make it cleaner, faster, they wanted to make me look like the old guard, a dinosaur founder clinging to outdated ideals. The narrative had been written before the data had even arrived. And when I finally read all the emails, side messages, meeting minutes, I didn't feel rage. I felt peace. Because now I knew. This wasn't about me being wrong. This was about me being inconvenient, too ethical, too committed to long-term thinking in a room full of short-term flips. When I confronted Alan, weeks later, calmly face-to-face, I didn't yell. I didn't throw documents on the table. I just said, "You didn't break the company. You broke trust. And that's something no acquisition can fix." He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Later that week, a journalist reached out. Apparently, an anonymous source had sent them some documents, meeting notes, Slack exports, financial manipulation before the board vote. I wasn't the source, but I knew who was. And when the story broke, founder ousted in shadow deal, board faces ethics questions. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reality. They had rewritten the truth, but the truth had a backup copy, just like everything else I'd built. I didn't rebuild to prove a point. I rebuilt because it was necessary. After everything that happened, the betrayal, the silence, the manipulation, I could have just walked away, but I wasn't wired like that. Northgate didn't start with fireworks or press releases. It started with a question. What would it look like to build it right this time? No ego, no shortcuts, just trust, purpose, and a team that remembered what it felt like to work in a place that respected people more than valuations. This time, there was no race. We weren't trying to go faster than everyone else. We were trying to go deeper, to build things that would last longer than headlines or hype cycles. I wrote the code differently, not just to run, but to adapt. Rachel redesigned the product onboarding to be human first, not conversion obsessed. Daniel rebuilt our data layer with transparency at its core. Our customer agreements? No fine print, just plain English. We had no board, only partners. We had no culture slide deck. Our culture was the work, and people noticed. Clients who'd been burned by the churn and burn model of tech startups started calling us, not with RFPs, with stories. I'm tired of buying lies, one said. I want to build something that lasts. We became known, quietly, as the company that didn't sell speed. We sold solidity. And in a world obsessed with disruption, stability became revolutionary. Former competitors reached out. One even said, "You're not competing with us. You're outlasting us." That hit differently. I started mentoring again. Young founders, burned out engineers, disillusioned creatives, people who'd seen the dark side of scale and were looking for a better way. I told them what I'd learned the hard way. Build something so strong, they'll have to lie to take it from you. And then build something stronger. The industry started to shift, not because of us, but because people were watching us. And that's how respect came back. Not with a headline, not with a round of funding, but with consistency. One day out of nowhere, I got a handwritten letter from a junior dev who'd interned with us back in the Virion days. He wrote, "I used to think tech was all about who moves fastest, but after watching you, I learned it's about who stays when others bail. You taught me what integrity looks like." That letter's on my desk. Next to it, a little note I scribbled during our first Northgate team meeting. Let's never forget what we're not building. And we haven't. They came back. It started with a call from someone I never expected to hear from again. Brent Halverson, one of the former Virion investors, who once pushed to modernize leadership. He was polite, even humble, but I recognized the tone, desperate dressed as diplomacy. "We're pulling together a recovery task force," he said. "We'd like you to lead it." I didn't say no, I just asked, "Why now?" He didn't flinch. "We've realized something. The company didn't fall because the market changed. It fell because we took the soul out of it. You were that soul." And just like that, they offered it back. Not just a role, not just influence, control. They wanted me to lead a new integration effort between what remained of Virion and other struggling portfolio companies. A multi-brand initiative, a resurrection basically. They dangled titles. Chief Vision Officer, Head of Strategic Transformation, even Chairman. I didn't bite because I wasn't coming back to wear a suit and smile at shareholder meetings. I laid down my terms. No boards, no dilution, no hidden clauses. I wanted full autonomy over product and culture. I would choose the team. I would approve every hire. And if they wanted transformation, they'd have to let me burn the old playbook. To my surprise, they agreed. Fully, so I returned. Not to lead the broken structure, but to rewire it from the inside, using Northgate's DNA, our process, our people, our philosophy. I walked back into that building, the same one where they'd once handed me a cardboard box. But this time, the receptionist stood and said, "Welcome back, Mr. Grant." No applause, no ceremony, just silence, and the quiet respect that only comes from results. Alan wasn't there. Marcus had vanished into consulting, but a few of the faces were familiar, and they looked relieved. On day one, I held a town hall. I didn't talk about mission statements. I talked about why people leave, why they burn out, why companies lose their soul when they chase scale without roots. I ended with this: titles don't build trust, culture does, and this time, we build it together, or not at all. The room stood still, not because of power, but because of conviction. That's how you return, not with a crown, but with clarity. It felt strange pulling into that same parking lot again. Same building, same revolving glass doors, but everything else? Different. I wasn't the same man who had walked out a year before with a cardboard box and a calm goodbye. That man had something to prove. This one didn't. I wore no suit, no entourage, just a Northgate jacket and the same leather messenger bag I'd used since our garage days. The security guard, Kyle, still there, gave me a nod that said more than any words could. "Glad you're back," he said. I smiled. "Thanks. This time I stay on my terms." There was no banner, no press release, no fake applause in the lobby. Just quiet recognition from a few people who remembered who built the foundation they'd nearly buried. I moved into the same office they'd once emptied, but I didn't touch the old furniture. We gutted the space, made it open, collaborative, alive. No more glass walls separating leaders from workers. No more gatekeepers. Just work, done right. I didn't fire people out of ego. I coached, I realigned. Those who wanted to play politics left on their own. And the ones who stayed, they became the backbone of a company that was slowly finding its soul again. People started talking. Competitors noticed. Clients returned. Not because we begged, but because they remembered. I never once said, "I told you so." Didn't need to. Vindication doesn't require volume. It just needs time. The board, mostly gone, replaced with silent partners who understood their role. Support, step back, let the builders build. Sometimes I'd walk the hallways alone at night just to feel the weight of it all. One evening I passed a young developer working late. He looked up and said, "You're the guy, right? The founder who got pushed out and came back?" I paused. "I'm the guy who never stopped building," I said. He smiled. "Glad you didn't. Me too." I used to think legacy was about having your name on the wall. Now I know it's about who still speaks your name when you're not in the room. I started mentoring every Friday. No cameras, no TED Talks, just real conversations with people building something of their own, or trying to. Young founders, disillusioned engineers, interns with ideas no one took seriously. I told them the truth. That power doesn't come from titles. It comes from consistency. That vision means nothing without people who believe in it and a process that protects it. We launched the Northgate Fellowship, a leadership program that pairs every department head with someone 5 years behind them. Teach what you wish you had known. Build someone better than you. That's the goal now. Not to be irreplaceable, but to be remembered as the one who built what lasted. My daughter Emily works with us now, part-time. She says she doesn't want to run the company. She wants to learn how to build her own one day. That's enough for me. Because legacy isn't about staying forever. It's about leaving something that doesn't fall when you walk away. I never raised my voice. I never begged to stay. I just kept building. And in time, they realized, you don't erase a foundation by repainting the walls. Real value doesn't need applause. It doesn't need noise. It reveals itself when everything else collapses. That's the lesson. Let them doubt you. Let them replace you. Let them forget your name just for a while. Because if you built it with integrity, eventually they remember. And when they do, you won't need to say a word.